Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Giving Well, Living and Leaving a Legacy, jointly organized by the Law Society Pro Bono Services and the Community Foundation of Singapore. My name is Ching Ing, and I will be your host. First, some housekeeping matters. You can download the materials for this talk from the documents icon on your panel. Second, please feel free to ask any questions at all during the webinar, and we will try our best to answer them today. Finally, please note that the documents provided and the discussion is not intended to substitute any form of legal advice, and if you require specific legal advice, please remember to consult a lawyer. Let me introduce our panel. Today, we have Ms. Catherine Loh and Mr. Francisco joining us. Catherine is the Chief Executive Officer of the Community Foundation of Singapore, CFS for short. Catherine started her career at GIC and spent more than 20 years in the financial industry in various leadership roles in the Singapore offices of Lehman Brothers, Nomura, and Goldman Sachs. Catherine has always been actively involved in philanthropy and volunteer work and is regularly invited to speak on these topics as well as on charity governance. Francis is a senior lawyer and legal advisor at Harry Elias Partnership. Having close to 30 years of legal practice, Francis has advised and represented numerous individuals and businesses on a wide variety of issues, from the commonplace to the complex. We will be benefiting from Francis's expertise today, as he also heads the private client practice, which includes advising on legacy giving. Recently, Francis was awarded the Advanced Certificate in Trust Services by the Wealth Management Institute of NTU Singapore. Catherine and Francis, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, glad to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Now, the pleasure is ours. We are so privileged to have two experts on legacy giving on our panel today. So before we delve into the discussion, we will run a quick poll. Soon, the participants will see a question appearing on your screen. The first question, do you have a will or have you set up a trust? Yes or no? So we will be closing the polls in about 10 seconds. Please complete the poll now. And we will close the poll. And the results are out. 25% yes and 75% no. Francis, any comments on the results, please?
Well, this result is not surprising. We are in an Asian society, and typically we are very cautious about discussing, legacy or things dealing with, beyond our life. So my encouragement to all of the participants and listeners today is it's never too early to start planning. And the better you plan, the better your giving will be.
Thank you for sharing that, Francis. And I think this audience will also find the webinar useful because we will be finding out the various ways to set up legacy gifts. Now let's move on to the second question in the poll. You will see the question on your screen now. Have you considered leaving a gift to charity in your will or through a trust? So you have about 10 more seconds to complete the poll. And we will be closing the polls now. The results are out. 63% yes, which is very encouraging, and 38% no. Catherine, do you have any comments on the results?
Well, I would say this is a very encouraging results that so many of the audience here is thinking about or intending to leave something behind. And I think this is really why we want to have this conversation, right? Because planning ahead is very important, and legacy gifts in other developed countries like the US accounts for like 24% of total annual gifts to charity. And I think in Singapore, the number is actually very, very low. So, it is really something that we should encourage going forward.
Yes, and I think for those who have not considered leaving a gift to charity yet, perhaps you will find out from this webinar why you should start planning to do so, and in particular, consider CFS as a partner in giving. So now let's move on. To kick things off, Catherine, could you provide an overview of who CFS is and what you do?
Welcome. I would say CFS is actually a very, very good secret. It's one of the best kept secrets in Singapore. We are a charity. We've been around for 12 years, but like a charity, we don't do a lot of marketing, and so not many people in general know about us. But we have actually done quite a fair bit, especially in the area of legacy giving. So we are a charity. We're supported by MCCY, and our vision is really to inspire giving. And we do that by helping our donors establish their own charitable funds. And over the past 12 years, we have established about 150 funds. And these funds in total have given out about $100 million to over 400 charities in Singapore. So a lot of good work has been done across a lot of sectors, from education to health to arts, to the environment. And basically the work that we do, is almost similar to I would say like a family foundation providing the grant administration and also the grant making service, so that donors know how their money has been given out.
Yes, thank you very much for sharing that, Catherine. And on the next slide, we actually have a photograph from a newspaper article uh, of Mr. Lien Be Luan. Would you be able to share with us a little bit about what CFS has done in this particular case?
Yes, well, my donor is the baby in the photo. So he was the one who actually started a fund in honor of his grandfather, the old gentleman on the right. And basically, he wanted to start this fund to continue his grandfather's legacy. His grandfather was a newspaper editor of the Nanyang Xiangbao, and he was also an author of over 20 Chinese books. So the younger Mr. Lien wanted to, continue his granddad's legacy in contributing that back to society, and he set up the fund. And we have worked with him, looking at the various causes to support. His favorite cause is, of course, education, in line with his granddad's, interest in literature. And one of the new things that we have done, a modern take on education, like now, right, is really to help low-income children, to have access to preschool education. So that is something that he has done.
Thank you for sharing that, Catherine. And Francis, from your point of view, what is legacy giving?
Looking at Mr. Lian's case, I think the most basic definition would be that, legacy giving is planned giving. You plan to make this gift in order to impact beyond generations. And I think this is a wonderful idea to keep in mind. You see, through life, you would have received, many blessings. You would have accumulated many resources. And now it comes your turn to actually bless others. And it actually creates, a cycle of impacting lives beyond just your time. It can be a simple gift, one off, or it can be structured such that it's repeated gifts over time and even past your lifetime. I always believe that everyone has something to give. It's never too early to start planning, and it is never too early to start giving.
Thank you very much for sharing that very motivational statement, Francis. Yeah, I think it is. When you think about legacy giving like that, it's such a powerful act of kindness that transcends your own lifetime, and that's truly wonderful. Catherine, are you able to share with us, in the course of meeting so many donors at your work at CFS, what are some other motivations that donors may have for setting up a legacy gift?
In general, most of our donors who come to us, they are already generous. They intend to give, and they are really looking for, the hows and the why, the hows and the whats, right? And what is a way to do it? But at the end of the day, the motivation is usually very personal. Some could be very grateful. Is a show of gratitude that they give back because somebody has given them a chance to have an education and therefore they have made it in life. Or say they would want to honor someone, like in Mr. Lian's case, he wanted to honor his grandfather, and some want to give because they want to celebrate a significant birthday, or a wedding anniversary. So I've got many examples of donors setting up legacy gifts in their 25th, 20th, 30th wedding anniversary, or the 70th or the 80th birthday. So I think it is actually a very nice touch to think about
Yeah,
others. Go, wow, you are celebrating a significant life event.
yeah. So instead of spending the money on a very big birthday gift or on a very, fancy party, you put that money towards a good cause instead. That's really such an inspiring idea. Okay, so now that we have the concept of legacy giving very clear in our minds, let's go into the practicalities of planning a legacy gift. First of all, what to give. So, Catherine, from a charity's perspective, what would be the ideal legacy gift?
Well, cash is best. It is the easiest to deploy, and the at the end of the day, the charities are good at what they are meant to do, right? Which is to support the beneficiaries. And so, if you give them cash, that would be the easiest way for them, to translate that into practical help for the end beneficiaries. But there are also many other ways to give. We have donors giving us tradable assets, like publicly listed stocks or bonds. We have seen larger assets like houses, and we have also got non-cash gifts like properties, works of arts, and other valuables.
Okay, so now let's look at the other side of the coin. Francis, what are the types of assets which you think charities may have some difficulties accepting or administering?
I like what Catherine says. Cash is best. And when you think of assets that charities may have difficulty in handling, I think it's not a good idea to actually pigeonhole and say this can or that one cannot. I'd rather just leave the donors with three concepts, and look at it in terms of the legalities, whether there are any storage or upkeep costs, and whether there are any restrictions that are involved in any of the gifting that you want to give. All right, so let me give you an example. Legalities. I have had a client that wanted to give their overseas property to a Singapore charity. The legalities are such that perhaps this charity is unable to own foreign real estate. So that is one a legality, an example of a legality that interferes with the giving. Then, of course, you heard Catherine say, artworks and things like that, but you must balance that against storage costs. How are you going to take care of these artworks? I had a client that wanted to donate his wine collection over to the charity, and it came with complicated instructions of how to store these wines, and it became a case where the storage costs actually ate into the amount that was available for the charity to use. So that was a little bit counterproductive. And then restrictions, you know, if you are going to give, trust the charity to use the money well and wisely. If you in your giving put restrictions like I want the charity to invest this to earn in a certain type of rate of return, the charity may be then required to get a investment manager. And again, then you have investment management fees that eat into the principal sum, and it undermines your purpose of giving. So think about these things when you want to give. Keep it simple. Maybe follow the guideline that Catherine gave. Cash is best after all.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Francis. And what about certain types of assets that might be considered equivalent to cash? For example, Bitcoin. Catherine, if a donor wished to donate Bitcoin to CFS, would you be able to accept that?
Well, I think Bitcoin is a very new asset. So, we haven't actually received any Bitcoins as donations yet. But I would say one of the things that we would have to look into would really be anti-money laundering issues. If
Mm,
somebody wants to give us a Bitcoin, because we are not able to trace, right, the source of funds. But having said that, right, I think the gifts that we are likely to see are like what Francis has talked about, whether is it artwork or houses, and I think if the audience out there is thinking about such assets, perhaps they can consider working with their the lawyer or the executor of the will to actually liquidate the assets
Mm,
before giving it out to the charities. And I would say this is very much part of, say, financial planning, right? Usually a property or expensive artworks could be worth a lot of money, and you could want to one might want to give to not just all to charities, and we have never asked a donor to give everything that he has to a charity. Definitely take care of the family, take care of your loved ones, and if you do have enough, please do share with the charities. So we do have donors coming to us and say that if when the time comes, the lawyer will contact us and let us know if there is a portion left for us. Yeah.
Okay. And what if a donor does not have ready cash now? Because what I take away from both of your advice is that, there are many ways to give, but cash is best, right? So what if someone does not have cash now, Francis? Would this person still be able to give meaningfully?
I believe so. But I think many Singaporeans are in a category where we are asset rich but cash poor. All right. But then again, that doesn't prevent you from planning your giving during your lifetime. So let me give you three instances that may help our listeners out there kickstart that thinking process. Now, if you are having, say, a limited budget, $300 that you can save every month, and you're wondering, if I save this for the next 30 years, I'm only going to have X amount of dollars. But you can actually create an estate through instruments such as insurance. So I'm told that as part of prudent financial planning, you are actually able to take a portion of, say, that $300, say $200, invest it in a whole life policy that is able to cover you at, say, event of death for $1 million. And so if you're going to pass away, and all of us will at some point, then that money will then be paid out into your estate. And if you have done your will or your trust or your legacy giving, then as part of that plan, it would be given to the beneficiary. So that's one example. The other is what Catherine was mentioning about liquidating assets. You may have your favorite art collection, but we may not be able to fully appreciate the beauty of that art. And I think what's more important to the charity is what's the dollar value of that art. If you're going to leave it to the charity to start an auction and have to auction it off, that is again out of their comfort zone, and it's going to be incurring additional costs. It may be important to work with your professional planners to actually come up with a plan that upon your passing, have a plan to value this, liquidate this, and then have that cash equivalent given over to charity. Uh, and I want to highlight also that all of this must be done in the context of your responsible estate planning. I cannot emphasize enough what Catherine mentioned earlier, that you must care for your family. We've had situations where people just give everything to charity and forget to provide for their wife and children, and then that creates its own set of problems, which we might have time to talk about later. But one more point, which is about joint assets. A lot of us in our lifetime now have joint assets, either with parents, siblings, or with the wife, or your spouse. Now, the problem with that is that Singapore has a common law concept, a right of survivorship, which means that as a general rule, the last person standing in a joint owned property will be the one that takes completely. So you may be thinking, I've got 50% of this bank account, 50% of that real estate. But if it's in joint ownership, upon your passing, the person that survives you takes 100% and you've got nothing left to give. So you need to do your planning in your lifetime about what you're going to do about these joint assets and how you are going to plan for them to be given away upon your passing. So some food for thought, but you got to start somewhere with your planning.
Yes, indeed. There are many, many practical considerations to bear in mind when planning a legacy gift in order to ensure that your gift makes the impact that you want it to make. One thing which really struck me, Francis, when you were speaking was that even something as simple as taking out an insurance policy in the course of your lifetime could be considered as a legacy gift. And if everyone bears that in mind, actually legacy giving is a truly attainable goal for, I would say, the layperson, because most people would be able to take out an insurance policy, I mean, to various extents, but to some extent. And that brings me to my next question for Catherine, which is, how attainable is it for someone to actually work with CFS on legacy giving? Because I understand that there might be some minimum requirements in terms of setting up a fund.
Welcome to work with CFS to set up a charitable fund. Yes, we do have a minimum requirement of $200,000. However, if you already have a charity that you already like, you can always just name the charity in your will, right? And that charity will be taken care of and be blessed. After you're no longer around. So for those donors who work with us, usually they have a more complicated assets, or they want us to manage the assets in the sense that it is a larger pool of money. They want us to help them to divide up the funds to more than one charity and give it out over a period of time, because some don't feel comfortable giving one large sum of money to one charity. Who knows what's going to happen, right, to the charity. They may just close down. So therefore, they rely on CFS to actually monitor the grants as we give them out over time. And should the charity cease to exist, or they are no longer doing the good work that they should be doing, we can actually move the funds to other charities that are doing similar good work in the same cause. So some also donors also may not know exactly which charity or what kind of programs that they want to support, because who knows, right, that money is going to to be available only in say 30-40 years time. So then they would request a CFS to actually look out for they would tell us the cost, whether it's education or health, but then can look for something that is relevant at that particular point in time.
Okay, and when the donors work with CFS in the process of planning their legacy gift, must they be able to tell you exactly how much they will leave to the charity? Or is it fine as long as they can meet the minimum requirement of 200,000 to set up a fund?
Yeah, I think not really. Most of us really wouldn't know, right? So even like what Francis say, how much is that wine collection? So it's only until after the auction then you would know what is the true value, and then we have to deduct off a lot of the administrative costs as well. So I can give you one example. Let's call her Margaret. She came to CFS when she was planning her will. So she's above 50. She's a professional, and she's just single. And she has always been very supportive of education. And there are a couple of charities that she has always been supporting for the many years now. And she wants to make sure that even when she's no longer around, these two charities will continue to be supported. Say for about 20 years, and then the balance of the money is actually used for other programs that is applicable at that point in time, right? And we really do not know right now what is it, but she just requested CFS, to apportion that money for the purpose of education. So what she did with us was she set up what we call a flow-through fund. So a
Mm.
flow-through fund means that as and when the money comes in, the money can be can be dispersed out. And it is also good for her, to start working with us now and to look out, and be, to know more about what are the other charities out there, so that at least, when she gives in the future, she has the peace of mind knowing that, these are the charities out there doing good work in the areas that she's interested in. And because she wants to be anonymous, she named her fund, not under her own name. She called it something like a cassia fund, after her favorite tree. And the instructions that she's given to us is that, okay, when the time comes, apportion 25% to charity A, 25% to charity B, and the rest, CFS can select the charities or programs that is, according to the needs of the future, but all in the area of education. So yeah, you do not really need to tell us exactly what is the amount.
Yeah, it's great to know that there's some flexibility involved. And also, what struck me was that your legacy giving can actually start during your lifetime. And it's not that you wait until the end of your lifetime when your assets are distributed, whether then that's when the charities can start to see the impact of your giving. So it's possible to have that giving continue on past your lifetime as well. So thank you very much for sharing that example and clarifying that for us. And I think what I got from both Francis and Catherine is that it's really advisable for donors to reach out early to charities if you have that intention of giving them something, because then you can iron out all the issues in relation to accepting the gift, whether the charity is sophisticated enough to administer certain gifts. And I guess that brings us to the next topic, which is when to start planning. So Catherine, when do you think charities should when do you think charities should be notified by donors of that intention to give?
Welcome. I think if you are, what we would encourage, right, really is that if be charitable now, live a legacy now, right? So live a life of values, if you have enough, share, especially right now in the current climate, a lot of charities are in need of help because, the stresses of COVID-19, right? A lot of social issues have emerged, and definitely there are a lot more people who need our help right now. So therefore, I would say don't just give, after you're no longer around. So give now, and one of the benefits is that you get a tax deduction, right, of your income when you give. And as to whether or not you want to inform your charity, I think this is a very much up to the donor to decide. One of the issues that you may encounter would be if you tell the charity right now that you intend to leave them something, and they will continue to engage you as a donor, right? And then you receive your Chinese New Year cards, your Christmas cards, and then if somewhere down the line you decide that you don't want to support them anymore, then you have this rather awkward situation. So we do have donors, telling us, don't tell the charities yet, that I have established a fund with you, that I intend to give them the money. I just let you know first, so that you know how to, implement when the time comes. So it is really, a balance. And like what Francis say, really go and get to know the charity and make sure that they can handle it. So there are some smaller charities that may not be able to handle, say, an endowment fund. So, that is where, professionals like us can come in, and we can actually help to actually, administer that. And at the end of the day, like I said, right, just provide cash, to the end beneficiaries.
Mm. And I see that CFS may be rolling out an online legacy pledge system. I've seen that in the news, I think announced sometime in March 2020. So is the purpose of the legacy pledge meant to notify CFS in advance of a donor's intention to work with CFS or partner CFS for legacy giving?
Yes, yeah, I think you know, legacy, will is actually not something that you write once and then you put it in your drawer and forget about it, right? So it needs to be reviewed regularly. So when a donor, sends us a pledge form, so at least we have the donor in our database. So we will engage the donor regularly. We can keep them updated on what's going on, in the charities that they're interested in or the sectors that they're interested in supporting. And also, we would have the contact of the lawyers or the family, the next of kin, so that if there are any, discussions, or any issues, we know who to call. And I must also add that a pledge is actually not binding, so it is really just, an intention, right? So to let us know so that we know how to follow up.
Mm.
Yes. And Francis, earlier in terms of when to start planning, you mentioned that it would be good to engage the family members early so that they are not surprised by the will or the trust, when the time comes. We actually have a question coming in from the audience, which is somewhat related to this issue, and I'm going to read out the question now. I plan to leave a large legacy gift to my favorite charity, but my children are unhappy about my decision. Can my children dispute my decision upon my passing? So this is someone who has actually started planning early and actually engaged his family members on it and have sensed some resistance. So what would be your advice for for this participant?
Okay,
Can His question is, can my children dispute my decision upon my passing?
okay. I think, let's see, let's approach it this way. Your giving to your charity, it should be, as I said, part of your overall responsible planning for your family's future. Not just when you are alive, but also anticipating the time when you are not around. So you need to responsibly answer to yourself. Have you taken care of your wife? Have you taken care of your children? Taken care in the sense that you've provided adequately for them. All right. And then out of your other resources, you are then planning to give a lot more to the charity. And if this is being done in the context of a will, a carefully drafted will can actually express your intentions such that it will be beyond challenge. All right. But I earlier mentioned that you have to take care and provide for the needs of your wife and children because the law does provide where if you have young children or a wife who is not working and suddenly, and I give you an extreme example here, you give everything to your favorite charity and you leave zero for these people, but your children still need to go to school. Your wife is still having to look after the children. In circumstances like that, they can actually avail themselves of legal procedures to actually challenge and ask for a proper provision for them. So, by and large, I think Catherine and I, we've talked about this before. You should, as part of legacy giving, it is planned giving. And it has to be done responsibly, it has to be done early, and that takes into account taking care of your family first.
Okay.
And
Thank
yeah, may I add something?
Yes, please go ahead, Catherine.
Yeah, in addition to what Francis has said, right, that's the legal aspect. And from a very personal point of view, right? So leaving a legacy gift is really, leaving, something of ourselves behind, right? You want to be remembered as, someone that has a certain set of values, someone who's generous, kind, right? And therefore, it is very important that the people whom you care about most, most likely your family and your very close relatives, think well of you as well. So that's why when we work with our donors, we really often encourage them to let their family know involve their spouses, involve their children, and let them know what you are doing. So that's why it's good to give while you are still around and when the children can see, so that they know and they understand. And you can go on volunteering activities together as a family. So I think this actually builds the family bonds, and this is really what makes a legacy, right? Because when we are no longer around, who's going to remember us, right? So yeah, after the lawyers, it's really going to be your family and friends, right? And we want them to be happy when they think about us.
Yeah.
Catherine, let me jump in there, and say I fully agree. Uh, we want the legacy giving to establish a culture of giving,
Yes.
as opposed to something that divides the family and undermines the whole purpose of giving in the first place. We don't want it to be divisive. So I think, Catherine, you are so right. Communication is key, and fostering and building these bonds that last beyond your lifetime is critical.
Yes.
Yes. And I think instilling that spirit of kindness and philanthropy in your children, it's also a very valuable gift to live them, yeah, in your lifetime and beyond. So moving on to the next topic then, of who to give to. I would imagine that most donors, when they come to CFS or any other charity, they would be very concerned to make sure that their funds are spent in a way that's responsible, that the charity is accountable for them, and that the gifts are used in a way that would really make impact. So, Francis, what would your advice be for donors? What type of due diligence should they conduct on the charities to make sure that their giving would be well done and well spent?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. In when my early days of practice, when this concept of giving wasn't so well developed, I get clients that come to me, in the twilight years of their life and just say, I think I'll just give towards educational causes, and to them, that was the limit or the extent of their concept of giving. But these days, people are more sophisticated. People want to believe and support causes that they believe in. They want to feel that their life has purpose and that it has contributed to the well-being of others. So let's start with that basic concept, because that should be what drives your legacy giving and the planning involved in it. If you look at a charity or any organization that you want to support, does their mission resonate with your personal giving agenda? Then you need to look into their strategic plan. If they are going to be some, organization that doesn't have good administration, doesn't have good financial controls, uh, how are you going to give effectively over the years? They themselves may be in need of assistance. And then, of course, you need to see whether they have a sustainable fundraising plan. Are they just living hand to mouth? They might be gone tomorrow. If the next pandemic or the next catastrophe hits, you want them to be able to be sustainable so that they can carry out your objectives of giving. Catherine mentioned earlier, you want to make sure that if you're giving during your lifetime, especially, that the organization has some tax exemptions. And then, of course, you want to look into the financial aspects. Now, here is where I just want to add a word of caution. You are not going to be the financial policeman trying to go through their accounts with a fine tooth comb. I've had clients that come to me and say, I want to do this financial due diligence because I want to ensure if I donate $1, another or the whole dollar goes to the, to the charity at hand, and not eaten up by administration. But, that's not realistic. These organizations have administration costs and overhead costs. So, what you're really looking for is governance. What you're really looking for is efficiency and responsibility. So, let me give you a little tip here. For if you are donating within the Singapore context, you can go to the charity portal where the charities would be registered and they would have IPC status. IPC status is a good hint because that also means donations to them are tax exempt. And also, they have an obligation to upload their governance criterias, their financials, and their annual reports on the portal itself. So that's a good and easy way of, just doing your paper investigation as such. But this is really big for Catherine and I. Then nothing beats getting involved. All right, get involved, find out what these programs the people are doing, find out who's running it, speak to the management, speak to the volunteers, speak to the beneficiaries who are receiving the benefit of these programs, and then build up your own sense of confidence whether this is an organization that you want to bless through the generations. All right. Now, a quick word of caution for overseas donations. All right. I've had some scare stories. I've had a client that actually supported a orphanage, in one of the neighboring countries. He had done his basic due diligence. He had spoken to the person that's running this, but as it turned out, the first year was good, second year was good. Third year, the guy decided to use donations to build himself a bungalow because he said he deserved that kind of living standard after having done good work. So the money was gradually diverted, and this client only found out about it in the fifth year. And that's when he said, no, enough, I'm going to stop. But when it's overseas, the risks are a bit higher. And the old adage, it says charity begins at home. So I think there are lots of meaningful causes here in Singapore that need help. And if you need guidance, speak to Catherine and CFS. I'm sure they've got lots of ideas.
Yes, perhaps now, Catherine, you can share with us, how does CFS help donors to identify which causes to donate to? And how do you help them get to know them better?
Well, I guess what Francis has mentioned, all these points are really the basic duty that we would do. We would call them like hygiene factors, right? Even before we recommend or we mention a particular charity to our donors, we would have done all these, the duty. And yes, the charity portal is one very good way to just, check and see whether the charity at least has been punctual in submitting their financial statements and their annual reports. And if they're late in submitting their annual reports, it would be reflected as late submission. So at least that could be a little red flag, right? So yes, but there are a lot of donors are also very busy people. So doing this kind of due diligence might be very time consuming for them. And I've got an example, of a case, maybe I can share. So it's the children of a doctor. So Dr. Ang, he passed away a couple of years ago, and in his will, he left a rather large sum of money to four charities, but with very specific requirements. And the children's issue, was that they are not sure and they don't have the confidence to carry out his wishes on their own, and that was how they got introduced to CFS by their lawyer. And one of the charities that Dr. Ang selected was no longer in operation. And then Dr. Ang wanted to support a very, very specific type of medical research. He's a doctor after all, right? And his children, they are not the doctors and they don't really know who to approach. Is it a university or is it a hospital? So they don't really know. And also because the amount is large, the children don't feel comfortable donating the money all at one go, come to the remaining charities that have been identified. So what they really want is to hold the charities accountable, and they want to know that the money is how the money has been spent and what is really the impact, right, of spending the money. So what they did with us was they established a flow-through fund. And again, because they wanted to remember their father's legacy, they called the fund, Dr. C.T. Ang Foundation. And I would just like to mention, right? So the funds that are set up with us, some can name it a fund, some can name it the word foundation. They use the word foundation. However, when you use the word foundation, it means that you cannot take in any other donation. So it can only be your own private money. So it can be a corporate foundation, it could be a private, individual foundation. Whether you establish it on your own, as a entity, or when you establish a fund with us and you name it foundation, it basically means that you do not accept outside donations. It's only private money. Yeah.
Mm,
And so back to the story, right? So the first thing we did was to identify one charity that is doing exactly the same thing and serving exactly the same type of beneficiaries uh, as the charity that was no longer in existence. So that was one. Then the other thing is through our network, we found a hospital in Singapore that is keen to embark on the kind of a medical research that Dr. Ang wanted to do. And because it is a long-term multi-year project, so we actually work with the hospital to actually identify and plan out how much money is actually required to do the research and how much needed to be given out every year, and then get every year what kind of a milestone reports that we would be getting, which we would go onward submit and share with the family. And then with the remaining charities, we work with the family to identify programs that actually resonate with all the family members as well. So, even if you say hospital, there are many things that you could do to support a hospital. So, in this case, the money went towards some training courses for the nurses. And again, it is expensed out over a few years. Right, so we would be dispersing the money out over a few years, and I think in gratitude there is a room that is named after the donor. And finally, what is really important to the family is really that the family reserves the right to stop the grants to any particular charity if the
mm,
objectives are not met. So at the end of the day, right, what the family is really looking for is really peace of mind. Right, peace of mind that their father's hard-earned money is really used well, and it is really used to benefit others in a real way. So working with a trusted entity is very important. And also if it is really your own money, then yes, please do your homework and make sure that this is a cause that you really believe in, and the charities that you would like to support are really the charities that's really doing the good work.
mm,
Yes, what I'm hearing is that a legacy gift can, while it has very good intentions, can also place quite a onerous or heavy burden on those who are administering the gifts. And what CFS really does is to ease that burden, right, by taking away a lot of the difficulties or complications that come with it. I mean, for example, what Catherine mentioned about being able to match the funds to to another cause, a similar cause, because the original charity identified by Dr. Ang was no longer operating. I thought that was a really great way in which CFS managed to help the administrators in this particular case. And Francis, my related question for you is, what would have happened if the donor wished to donate to the charity is no longer around, and you don't have someone like CFS helping you? What would actually happen to that legacy gift?
okay. Now this we're going into a potentially very technical and troublesome area of the law, but let me try to keep it as simple as possible here. Okay, if you are giving the gift by will, and let's say I name charity a specific charity A, and at the time of my passing away, charity A no longer exists as an entity. What that simply means is that the gift lapses. All right. And if you have not made proper provisions in your will for that portion of your estate, then you may have an intestate situation where, because the gift has failed, it falls outside of your will into the intestate succession law. And intestate succession law, generally speaking, means 50% goes to your spouse, the remaining 50% is divided equally among your children. And that may not be your intention. All right, so your purpose has now become undermined. A practical way to do it is to actually ensure in your giving, whether it's during your lifetime. Lifetime is less complicated because if you know that charity A is no longer around, you can always update, your plan and redirect the funds. But when you're passed away, then that gets a little bit more tricky because you're no longer around to give new instructions. So what is needed then is a bit of flexibility. So
Mm.
you may want to say, if you appoint, say, CFS, you don't want to tie Catherine down and say give this 25% to charity A. All right, and then if charity A is no longer there, Catherine has a problem. All right, what you may want to say is give 25% to charity A or causes or missions of similar type. All right, and then this gives a little bit more flexibility because you must understand, you are now planning during your lifetime and you're trying to use your so-called uh, forward planning to look into the future and say what will the world be like. And so you want to maintain some flexibility to allow your funds to be able to impact that future world and not to be outdated or sidelined because of overly tight descriptions. Hopefully that gives some insight, and I think the key word here is build flexibility into your legacy giving.
Thank you, Francis, for that very practical tip. And on the issue of who to give to, we actually have two questions coming in from the audience. So I'm going to read the first question out. Can I arrange for my CPF funds to be channeled to CFS instead of to an individual? Catherine, would you like to answer this question?
Um, I would think so, yes. So basically, you would identify CFS as the beneficiary, then put in the corporate UEN number. Yes, that can be done, but I think it would be great if you can have a chat with us first, so that we can actually understand your wishes, right? So at the end of the day, like what Francis has said, we work to honor our donors' wishes. So therefore, we would be able to provide some advice, as to like how best to structure your giving. So, whether it could be setting up a fund now so that you could name your fund that you have set up as a beneficiary in your will, your trust, or your insurance, as a nominee, right? So then all this could be done, and then with CFS you could work out what are the causes, what are the charities, and yes, we do a lot of all this planning, scenario planning. If charity A is no longer around, would you want to give to charity B or C, or would you want to give to another cause? Right. So what would you like to do? So at the end of the day, we also would request for flexibility, because things do change, and some examples would be there have been like endowment gifts, given to some universities, and after a period of time, certain causes are no longer popular, and then these causes are no longer being taught, and so but the endowment is specifically for these causes, scholarships for students taking these courses or going to these schools. Then you have a problem. So we
Mm.
try to put it into our deed, flexibility, so that at the end of the day, we can honor your wishes, while at the same time, we're being practical, so that we could actually execute and do the work.
Thank you for sharing that, Catherine. And the next question is also for you because it's also related to CFS. The question is, can CFS manage a legacy gift to support non-IPCs? And Francis had mentioned earlier that a charity with IPC status is one that can give tax exemption receipts.
Yeah. Well, there are like 2,000 over charities in Singapore. 600 of these are IPCs, so the rest are non-IPCs. So as long as it's a charity, yes, we can support. So the difference is when you donate to money that's onward identified for a non-IPC, then the money that goes into the fund is not eligible for a tax deduction. That's all.
Okay, so CFS would still be able to manage a legacy gift to support non-IPCs. Okay,
Yes.
and we have another question coming in, and this one is for Francis. I think because we are going on about who to give to and which charities we should actually choose, or what considerations to be more mindful of in our choosing process. There's actually a question from the audience. How should a charity prepare itself for legacy giving? So how should they make themselves more attractive, to sound more reliable to potential legacy donors? So Francis, quickly, any
Okay.
advice on this?
All right. So now we're looking from the charity perspective, right? You want to make yourself more attractive so that you can attract more of the donors. And I think really it is about having a basic outreach program. You want to make sure that your mission is easily understood and accessible. If you have a basic website that sets out these basic things in a FAQ, perhaps my mission, my guiding principles in terms of running my strategic program. That's probably a simple, cost-effective way of getting your message out there. And then, of course, it is the engagement with your volunteers. Your volunteers, who are the people who are giving of their time now because they believe in your cause, they are the people that are likely that are going to be supporting you, with their resources and with their legacy giving. So I would say, gone are the days when charities just kind of sit in a little back corner and wait for funds. I think the buzzword now is engagement. See how you can engage, because information is power, and the more people understand what you are doing and see your impact in the community, I think giving then follows naturally.
Thank you very much for sharing that advice, Francis. Now we will move on to the next topic, which is how to give. Um, we will go into how a legacy gift can be set up. So perhaps, Francis, you could advise us what are the common structures which are available?
Okay, I'm gonna do it in this quick fashion. I'm gonna give you a quick rundown of different types of structures, and then I'm gonna end off with a key idea called, get expert advice. All right. Now, essentially, during your lifetime, you can make donations, you can make pledges, you can set up a fund or a foundation, which is basically to kickstart your giving process. All right. But then this is just one part of your life. As we mentioned earlier, it has to be in the context of your overall estate planning, of how you're going to manage and take care of your affairs when you're no longer around. So that's where you start talking about things like wills. In your will, you are able to identify specific beneficiaries. You are able to set out your intentions and put all this into a neat document, which will be carried out upon your passing. Your legacy giving, the charities that you want to bless and benefit, can be built into that will. Earlier, Catherine mentioned about having a trust. If you have a trust that has been set up or which will be set up upon your passing, you can nominate those as your beneficiaries so that your estate then gets poured in to that trust, so that through a professional trustee, it can then be managed in order to uh, handle the funds to bless each of the beneficiaries that you've nominated through the years. Now, all of this underscores planning. All of this underscores advice. And I'm not just talking about legal advice here, because lawyers, we're just one part of the ecosystem. You've got CFS that can actually help you, advise you on the aspect of the giving. You have your tax advisors, you have your accountants. And for those of you who are more savvy with investments, you may want to say that I've got, my own investment portfolio. And you need to have all of these then built into a legacy plan that would be planned during your life and then carried over into your passing. And I think if you are able to get all of that together, that's how we hope the ideal scenario of giving can take place.
Thank you very much for that very succinct explanation, Francis, on what I'm sure is a very complicated topic. Just for my own understanding, you mentioned will and you mentioned trust. So, what are the main considerations one should bear in mind when choosing one over the other?
Okay, I think it's really a cost benefit analysis. In a will, uh, you can make a will during your lifetime. You can change your will any number of times during your lifetime. The last dated will at the time of your passing is the one that is going to be proved in probate. All right. Now, it means also that in a will scenario, you maintain control of over your assets until your last breath. Okay, assuming that you are of full mental capacity. Now, take a trust scenario, assuming you set up a trust during your lifetime. And this is something that a lot of us Asians, with our Asian mindset of wanting full control, can't wrap our heads around. You are essentially nominating a professional trustee. You're divesting ownership and control over into the hands of that professional trustee. Of course, there are benefits like you're protected from creditors. If you have a spouse that's angry at you and divorces you, the stuff that's in the trust can't be touched if it's set up properly. But the idea here is that during your lifetime, whatever goes into the trust is out of your control, and it's administered by the professional trustee in accordance with something called your letter of wishes. All right. So it's really also the trust has got running costs, all right, which won't exist in the case of a will scenario until after you pass away. So these are some of the things that you need to think about, and which again goes back to my earlier point. It underscores the need for professional advice from the tax, from the accounting, and the legal angle. And of course, if you're doing legacy giving, don't forget to consult people like CFS and Catherine, because they are the experts in this field.
Yes, so let's consult CFS now. Catherine, you mentioned that it's possible for donors to set up donor advised funds with CFS with a minimum sum of 200,000. So, could you share with us what are the different types of funds available and how one might choose one over the other?
Well, it really depends on really, when you intend to give. If you want to give as you earn, right, then the earlier examples of, say, a flow through fund would be more useful. So my first example, or even like a balloons case, right, the one in the picture. So it is a flow through fund in the sense that as he earns, he puts his the money that he wants to donate into the fund. So as and when he earns his money, he puts the money into the fund, and that earns tax deduction. And then every year we can work with him to identify which are the charities that he wants to support. So this is good for for donors who wants to give finite, over a finite period of time. So then there are those who just wants to give in perpetuity. So a lot of people like the idea of then having an endowment fund, and we can support donors who wish to set up an endowment fund as well. So you might one might ask, say, well, the universities also can help me to set up an endowment fund. So what is the difference? So if you were to set up an endowment fund with a university or a hospital or any one institution, then the money would only be used to support that particular institution. So for donors who choose to establish an endowment fund with us, basically, we can work with the donor to support more than one charity or institution. So, one of the biggest funds that we have is actually a fund set up by our late president, Mr. S.R. Nathan. So, it is a big fund, and now, the income that is generated from this fund goes to support many different educational institutions. So, to the ITE, to the various polytechnics, and to a couple of the universities as well. So, that is the benefit of having an endowment fund. And also, for family members, who want a, so-called light touch, endowment fund might be suitable. So maybe, just give you another example. So a family wanted to remember their late father. So after the patriarch's passing, the family just wanted to establish a fund to support his favorite charities in perpetuity. So the challenge then is that the children live overseas and want a hassle-free solution. So they establish an endowment fund with us. Then they requested that we invest the money. Endowment funds means that CFS would invest the money according to our investment mandate. And well, just digress a little bit, right? So when we invest the money, managing an endowment fund is actually quite different from managing a fund, that is like your own savings, because at the end of the day, the money is actually meant to benefit other people. So therefore, we are not out there taking the most risk trying to get maximize returns. So what we are going for is capital preservation, and what we are going for is really to generate a stable flow of annual income, so that year in year out, we can support the identified charities. So in this case, the family says, okay, whatever is generated from the endowment fund, the payout from the endowment fund, every year just 50% to charity A, 50% to charity B, right? And all they want to see would be, a CFS mailing them the, semi-annual donor statement, so that they know that the money has gone out. And if, the charities no longer exist, then yes, we can contact them um, until, they let us know that they sign over the authority to CFS, to manage it. But right now, because the family is around, yeah, we can just continue, updating the family. So I guess
Thanks.
at the end of the day, how or what structure, right, is really depending on, well, the amount. So if I would say a rule of thumb is, if the administration cost is like more than 1% or 2% of the amount that you intend to donate out, then you might want to reconsider, because the cost, is really like what Francis said, right? It's a cost benefit analysis.
Mm.
Yes. Thanks for sharing that, Catherine. And there's actually a question for you from the audience in relation to this topic of how to give. If I have a favorite charity, can I still work with CFS to manage the disbursement of my legacy to this charity? I guess the question is, whether they should just do it directly since they already have a relationship with the charity, or whether they should do it through CFS.
Welcome. I think one of the challenges is why people want to do to us is not because they don't trust the charity, but it's because they are planning for the future. They really do not know, who is in charge of the charity, 10, 20, 30 years down the road. So, so that's when the donors say, yes, put the money with us. And the instructions is really to just disperse a certain amount over time, so that the total sum can be dispersed out over 5 years or 10 years, or whatever period of time that the donor specifies.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. And now, Francis, your turn. There are also a few questions for you from the audience. Francis, it sounds very complicated to do this since there are so many parties involved. For example, legal, tax, investment professionals, CFS. Any advice to simplify this?
Yes, it is not as complicated as it sounds. What you basically need is to come up, first of all, with your own wish list. Okay, and if I could just help you out here, you need to think in terms of what are the assets that you currently have. You then need to think of who you are responsible for as your inner circle. All right. I can go through the list. You've got your spouse, you've got your children. Do you have a special needs child? Or do you have elderly parents that you need to take care of? Um, Assuming all of these are then well catered to, I would suggest that you then talk to, say, CFS, because it sounds to me that they are well placed to be a one stop shop to answer all your queries about giving the how to, the who to, you know, and the when to's. All right. So I think this would be the first three things that you would want to do. And then if you're going to want to be concerned about financial angles like tax, I think while CFS may have the experience from past cases, you would still want to seek your own tax advice. And then, of course, at the end of the day, when you're putting it all together, you know, you seek your legal counselor to actually help you bring it all together. So it's a sequence. You don't have to do it all at one go, but you need to have a plan, and you need to start working on that plan, especially while you're of able body and sound mind now.
That is very sound advice indeed, Francis. And there's another question for you. Sounds like a little bit of a complicated question, so I'll read it slowly. Can executors of a will give instructions to CFS to disburse legal legacy gift funds to a charity over a period of time if the testator did not specify such a condition, the condition being dispersing in installments to the charity in the will?
Okay. Yes, let me break it down. I'm not sure if I got all of the parts, but broadly speaking, you're assuming there is a will because executors are involved. You don't say whether or not there was originally a gift to a charity. I'm assuming if there wasn't, then the answer would be no. The executors cannot dream up of their own will to decide to give something to charity if it is not already provided for in the will. Most wills would have a residuary clause with named beneficiaries, and if the charity is not one of them, then I think the executor's first duty is to perform according to the will. Now, then, if you're saying that there was a clause that talks about giving to a charity, but then now the executors have decided that they want to take the administration off their hands, they want to involve perhaps CFS or convert it into a periodic kind of gift. Essentially, this is a variation, and my guidance to the executor is prudently seek directions from the court. If you are doing it in good faith and for the best interest of the estate, uh, I think the court would generally grant your request, but don't take matters into your own hands because executors are trustees and fiduciaries. It's a very, very onerous duty, and you don't want to be found on the wrong side of the law on that.
Yes, thank you for sharing that, Francis. I think it is important to note that executors should also consider their own liabilities and how to limit it in the course of performing their duties. Another question for CFS from coming from the audience. Does CFS also assist to give to Singapore registered churches, temples, etc.?
Unfortunately, no, we can't do that. However, churches and temples tend to be around for many years, and a lot of these institutions are very well established. I suppose you could just name them as a direct beneficiary in the will.
So this would be a case where the donor should work directly with the church or temple instead of working through CFS. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you very
because
much for
we can't
clarifying
we
that.
can't support them. Yeah, we've got to be secular. So everything except politics and religion we can't do.
Yes, understand. Okay. So thank you so much for the questions, audience. Please keep them coming. I'm going to move on to some other questions that we've also received, but we still have some time until the end of the session, so please feel free to post your questions. Catherine, is the process of setting up a legacy gift with CFS straightforward? What is the type of commitment and information required from the donors?
What is the type of information required from the donors? So I guess one of the things that we would want to do is to really meet the potential donor, to meet the prospect, and have an understanding as to what they're exactly trying to achieve. So we can provide some advice there, and after that, then we can establish a deed. Once the deed is established, we identify the causes, the charities, the programs. Then it is a fairly straightforward. So the timeline needed to get the deed signed is probably about less than a month, about a month.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That sounds really, really straightforward and fast free. So is the paperwork also prepared by CFS? You mentioned the deed.
Yeah, and I think once the deed is prepared, if it is if you intend to have the fund as a beneficiary in the will, then it is useful to actually share that with your lawyer so that the lawyer can take a glance and see, whether the wordings in the will matches, with the intention of the deed. Yeah.
See,
So
there's
I think
always
one
this
of the
reference.
Yeah. So I
Please
think
go ahead.
one of the the benefits of actually establishing a fund would then be well, it helps the lawyer to execute the will faster, simply because can just say that I name the CFS fund as the beneficiary, and then you don't have to think about which charity that you want to name in the will. And usually this is the decision that takes a long time. So, 'cause this we can work with a CFS, to actually identify, and you can change along the way.
Okay, sounds like a very involved and communicative process that you will have with CFS if you include them in your legacy giving. Okay, now we have a question for Francis. What are the key points donors should bear in mind to make sure that their legacy gift does not lapse? I think this question probably came from your earlier discussion, Francis, about how you make sure that your legacy gift does indeed go to the charity that you intend it to.
Okay, I think first of all, be clear in your purpose. All right. A lot of people don't define this properly. They just say that I want to support charity for educational purposes. All right. It's flexible, but then again, drill down deeper. What is your personal giving agenda? What type of education do you want to support? It could be early childcare, early education. It could be special education needs. So that then makes your giving more targeted. But then, of course, don't go to the other extreme where you say, I want to give to this particular special needs school, and that special needs school may not be around over the next 10 years to receive your giving, and then you may have an issue there. So I think first, be clear of your purpose. The second is when you are stating your gift description in your will, you don't want to be overly specific. You don't want to use language that ties down the manner of giving, the time of giving, such that it becomes a bit inflexible. All right. So to say that you want to give the gift in 4 tranches throughout a year, it may seem sensible to you at this point of time, but then again, it may not suit the needs of the charity, because they may need all of the money at a certain time of the year, and to be receiving that in 4 tranches doesn't quite meet their needs. So I think if you keep these simple points in mind, keep it simple, yet keep it flexible, I think this would ensure that your giving is effective.
Thank you very much for sharing that. So what I keep hearing, start early, be flexible, keep it simple, get advice. Okay, I'm going to close off this session with one last question to both Catherine and Francis. A lot of useful information was shared today. And if the audience had to just walk away with a few key points, what would it be? So, Catherine, could you go first?
Okay. Well, I would say that legacy giving is something that is very personal. So, do think about it, do involve your family, because this is something that should be a joyous affair. And like what Francis said, it shouldn't be divisive, it shouldn't split the family apart. This should be giving, volunteering and all these good activities. Should be something that brings you joy and happiness. So, I'm very happy to be able to share this with everyone here. And do check out our website, because there is a lot more information in there. So, if you do need to speak, can always contact us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. And Francis, any last wise words?
uh, I think this will resonate with a lot of the listeners and participants today. A theme that cropped up earlier was it all sounds very complicated. So many people involved, so hard to do. I want to set things in context for you. The formalities, the legalities, and whatever service providers, they are the support cast. We are the supporting actors. You are the main actor. You are the one that decides on the giving. You are the one that decides on how you want to bless, and you are the one that's going to impact future generations. So don't be deterred by what may seem complicated, because when you properly put the process in place, we are actually here to support. And the infrastructure and the messaging today is clear. Giving is good, giving should start, and giving is for everyone. So the sooner you do it, the better for everyone.
Thank you very much, Francis. So everyone, please remember to download CFS's brochure from the webinar, and we will be sending a feedback form for your completion. Please give us your feedback so that we can find out how to make our webinars better in the future. On behalf of the Law Society Pro Bono Services, thank you, Catherine and Francis, for your valuable insights, for your time. I had a lot of fun hosting this webinar and speaking to the both of you. And most of all, thank you to the audience for joining us today. Have a good evening.
Thank you.